The betrayal. The UNS Mercy's light drifted silently through the inky void, its pristine white hull adorned with blue markings that stood out starkly against the darkness of space. The universal symbol of medical aid, a red cross inside a blue circle, was prominently displayed on every surface, broadcasting its neutral status to any who might encounter it. Captain Elena Ortega stood on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the viewscreen, showing the planet Nexus IV below them, a world torn apart by a natural disaster that had devastated its largest settlements. "Status report on the evacuation," she requested, her voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. 3 days of non-stop rescue operations had taken their toll on her and her crew of 200 medical personnel and support staff. Dr. Miriam Chen, the ship's chief medical officer, responded without looking up from her data tablet. "We've treated over 2,000 patients, Captain. 400 critical cases are stabilized in the medical base. The Valexian authorities have requested we make one final sweep of the northern continent before departing." Ortega nodded. The Valexians were a relatively new species to join the Galactic Accord, their physiology challenging even for the advanced medical systems aboard the Mercy's Light. Yet her team had adapted quickly, saving countless lives in the aftermath of the tectonic catastrophe that had rocked their world. "Navigator, set course for the northern continent. Let's finish this mission properly," Ortega ordered, her voice betraying none of the concern she felt. The northern continent bordered a disputed region, claimed by both the Valexians and the Krell Imperium, a militaristic species known for their territorial aggression. "Captain," the communications officer, Lieutenant Park, suddenly called out, his voice tight with alarm. "I'm picking up multiple ships entering the system. Transponders identify them as Krell military vessels." Ortega frowned. "Broadcast our identification and mission parameters on all frequencies. Make it clear we're a medical vessel operating under Galactic Accord protection." On the view screen, 6 sleek, predatory vessels appeared, their angular hulls a deep crimson that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with precision, forming a pattern that made Ortega's military training scream in warning. It was an attack formation. "They're receiving our broadcast, but not responding," Park reported, his fingers dancing across his console. They're charging weapons systems." "That's impossible," Dr. Chen whispered, her face pale. "No one attacks a medical ship. It's the one law every species respects." Captain Ortega's mind raced. The Mercy's Light carried no weapons, no significant shielding beyond what was necessary for normal space travel. It was designed to heal, not to fight or defend itself. Emergency protocols. Prepare for immediate evacuation of all patients to emergency life pods. Contact Galactic Accord headquarters and... The first shot cut through space like a scythe, striking the Mercy's Light along its port side. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as systems failed and emergency bulkheads flanged shut. Ortega was thrown to the deck, the taste of blood in her mouth as she struggled to her feet. "Direct hit to our power core," the engineering officer shouted over the chaos. "We're losing containment." Through the view screen, Ortega watched in horror as the Krell vessels methodically surrounded her ship, their weapons continuing to fire with precise, calculated bursts. This was no mistake, no misidentification. The Krell knew exactly what they were targeting. "Get to the escape pods," she ordered, helping Dr. Chen to her feet. "Emergency Protocol Omega. Make sure the data core is secured." As the bridge crew rushed to comply, Ortega made her way to the central computer terminal, her fingers flying across the interface. Emergency Protocol Omega was a last resort, designed to preserve crucial information in the event of catastrophic failure. She initiated the download of all ship's logs, patient records, and most importantly, sensor data that would prove beyond doubt that the Krell had deliberately attacked an unarmed medical vessel. The ship rocked again as another volley struck, and Ortega knew they were running out of time. The Mercy's Light had minutes, perhaps seconds, before its power core breached. She grabbed the data crystal that emerged from the console and handed it to Dr. Chen. "Take this to Escape Pod Alpha," "It has to reach Earth," she said firmly. Dr. Chen clutched the crystal, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "What about you?" Ortega smiled grimly. "The captain goes down with the ship. Now go." As Dr. Chen and the remaining bridge crew fled, Ortega returned to her captain's chair, her fingers activating the ship-wide communication system. "This is Captain Ortega to all hands. The Mercy's light is lost. Proceed to escape pods immediately. This is not a drill." She watched on the secondary monitors as her crew herded patients into escape pods, medical staff carrying those too injured to move themselves. Pride swelled in her chest at their professionalism, even in the face of imminent death. The Krell ships continued their methodical assault, now targeting the escaping pods. Ortega's hands clenched the armrests of her chair as she watched pod after pod destroyed, vaporized in flashes of light that seemed obscenely beautiful against the blackness of space. One pod, smaller than the others and ejected from a secondary launch bay, managed to slip past the Krell's targeting systems. Escape Pod Alpha, carrying Dr. Chen and the precious data crystal, accelerated away from the dying ship, activating its stealth systems as it headed for the nearby wormhole relay that would eventually lead back to human space. Captain Ortega closed her eyes as the ship's computer announced the final countdown to core breach. The Mercy's light had been her command for 7 years, a symbol of humanity's commitment to peace and cooperation in a galaxy often fraught with tension. Now it would become something else, a symbol of betrayal and a call to arms. In her final moments, she activated the ship's emergency beacon, broadcasting a simple message across all frequencies: "Remember the Mercy's light." Then there was light and heat and nothing more. Dr. Miriam Chin drifted in and out of consciousness as Escape Pod Alpha tumbled through the wormhole network, its automated systems plotting the most direct course to Earth while evading detection. The pod's medical systems kept her alive, treating her injuries and maintaining her vital signs as days stretched into weeks. When the pod finally emerged in Sol system, triggering proximity alarms throughout Earth's defense grid, Dr. Chen was barely conscious. As military vessels surrounded the tiny craft, she clutched the data crystal to her chest, its contents the only evidence of a crime that would change the course of human history. Admiral James Thorne stood motionless in the briefing room of the Terran Security Council headquarters, his weathered face betraying no emotion as the final moments of the Mercy's light played out on the holographic display. The room was silent save for the recorded voices of Captain Ortega and her crew, their professionalism unwavering even as death closed in around them. When the recording ended, Admiral Thorne looked around at the assembled Security Council members, representatives from every major power in human space. "The data is conclusive," he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. The Krell Imperium deliberately targeted a clearly marked medical vessel operating under Galactic Accord protection. They methodically destroyed escape pods containing injured civilians of multiple species. They attempted to leave no survivors. "What do the Krell say?" asked Councillor Rajiv Singh, representative of the South Asian Confederation. "They deny everything," replied Ambassador Liu, Earth's representative to the Galactic Accord. "They claim to have no vessels in that sector during the time in question, despite the evidence we've presented." Admiral Thorne's jaw tightened. "They're lying. They believe we are weak, that we will accept their denials rather than risk conflict." "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" asked Councillor Hammond, her voice cautious. Thorne straightened to his full height, his military bearing unmistakable. "I am suggesting, councillors, that we show the galaxy the error of this assumption. For too long, humanity has been viewed as the peacemakers, the mediators, the healers. The Krell targeted the Mercy's light precisely because they believed we would do nothing in response." He gestured, and a new hologram appeared. The combined might of Earth's military forces, hundreds of vessels that had been built and maintained in the decades since humanity's entrance onto the galactic stage. We have maintained this fleet not out of aggression, but prudence. Now the time has come to use it. The Krell have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. If we do not respond with overwhelming force, other species will take note. More of our ships will be targeted. More of our people will die. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth had not engaged in large-scale military action against another species since the Proxima conflict 50 years earlier. They had positioned themselves as diplomats and healers, not warriors. And if this leads to full-scale war? Councillor Singh asked quietly. Admiral Thorne's eyes were cold as steel. Then we will give them a war they will never forget. The Reckoning. The Armstrong naval shipyards orbiting Mars had never seen such activity. Ships that had been in reserve status for decades were brought online, their systems updated with technologies that had been developed in secret by Earth's military research divisions. Vessels that the galaxy believed were simple exploration or diplomatic craft revealed hidden weapons systems and defensive capabilities far beyond what any alien intelligence had estimated. Admiral Thorne stood on the bridge of the EDF Retribution, a dreadnought-class vessel that officially didn't exist in any public record. Around him, officers moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the massive ship to lead the largest human fleet ever assembled. Fleet status, he requested, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing hundreds of ships forming up throughout the Sol system. All battle groups report ready, Admiral, responded Commander Sarah Levine, his executive officer. 97% of vessels are at full combat readiness. The remaining 3% will be online within the hour. Thorne nodded, satisfaction evident in his bearing if not his expression. The speed with which Earth's military had mobilized would shock the galaxy, particularly the Krell, who believe humans slow to anger and slower to act. And the new systems. Commander Levine's expression showed a hint of pride. The Jericho Protocol has been successfully integrated across all capital ships. Quantum entanglement communications are online, allowing for instantaneous coordination regardless of distance. The shield harmonics have been randomized according to the Morrigan algorithm. The Krell will find us. Difficult to target. These technologies represented decades of quiet innovation, developed not for conquest, but for a day humanity had hoped would never come, the day when their peaceful stance made them a target rather than a partner. On a secure channel, the face of Dr. Miriam Chen appeared. Still recovering from her injuries, she had insisted on joining the fleet as a medical advisor. Admiral, I've completed the analysis of Krell physiology based on our medical database. I've transmitted vulnerabilities that may be tactically relevant. Thorne acknowledged her with a nod. Your insight is appreciated, Doctor. I understand this is difficult for you. Chen's expression hardened. I watched them murder my patients, Admiral. I watched them target escape pods carrying the injured. My oath as a doctor is to do no harm, but the Krell have forfeited any claim to mercy. The Admiral understood her sentiment all too well. Throughout human history, there had been lines that, once crossed, changed the very nature of conflicts. Attacking the defenseless, the wounded, those under protection. These were acts that transformed limited engagements into total war. Prepare for wormhole transit, he ordered, his voice carrying across the bridge. Our first target is the Krell military installation at Vega Prime. Intelligence indicates it's where the vessels that attacked the Mercy's Light were deployed from. As the massive fleet moved toward the Sol system's wormhole gate, messages flooded in from across human space, from colonies, stations, and outposts. Messages of support, of rage, of determination. The destruction of the Mercy's Light had united humanity in a way nothing had for generations. In the Galactic Accord headquarters on neutral Centauri Prime, Ambassador Liu delivered humanity's formal declaration of war against the Krell Imperium, along with evidence of their unprovoked attack on a medical vessel. The Accord representatives from other species watched in stunned silence. Many had never thought to see the day when humans, known for their diplomatic patience, would unanimously choose war. The Krell ambassador, a tall, reptilian figure with iridescent scales, dismissed the evidence as fabrication. "Humans have always been skilled deceivers," he hissed. "This is merely a pretext for the aggression they have long planned." Ambassador Liu, normally the model of diplomatic restraint, fixed the Krell representative with a cold stare. "You murdered our doctors while they treated the injured. You targeted escape pods carrying patients. You believed we would respond with words." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that nonetheless carried throughout the chamber. "You were wrong." As she spoke those words, the human fleet emerged from wormhole transit near Vega Prime. Their arrival heralded not by the traditional transmission of identification codes, but by the immediate deployment of fighter squadrons and the activation of weapon systems. The Krell defense fleet scrambled to respond, but they had grown complacent. They had believed their own propaganda about human weakness, about humanity's reluctance to embrace their military potential. They had not prepared for the speed, coordination, or technological sophistication of the attack that now engulfed them. Admiral Thorne watched from the Retribution's bridge as the first phase of the battle unfolded. Human fighters moved in formations the Krell had never encountered, employing tactics developed through centuries of conflict on Earth long before humanity reached the stars. Capital ships fired in synchronized patterns that overwhelmed Krell defense systems, their shield harmonics shifting in ways that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. "The Krell flagship is attempting to coordinate a counterattack," reported the tactical officer. Thorne nodded. "Activate the Jericho protocol." Throughout the human fleet, specialized emitters came online, broadcasting across frequencies used by Krell communication systems. The signals, based on research into Krell neurology and psychology, created patterns that disrupted concentration, induced confusion, and rendered coordinated action nearly impossible. On the Krell vessels, command structures broke down as officers found themselves unable to issue coherent orders or understand incoming information. It was not mind control, nothing so crude or direct, but rather a sophisticated form of electronic warfare specifically tailored to Krell neurophysiology. The battle for Vega Prime was over in hours rather than the days or weeks the Krell had anticipated. Their defensive fleet was reduced to scattered vessels trying to flee, their military installation a floating ruin of twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. Admiral Thorne ordered the rescue of any Krell survivors, not out of mercy, but to send a message. These survivors would return to the Imperium with tales of humanity's power, of the foolishness of believing humans were merely peaceful explorers and healers rather than warriors who had chosen peace until peace was no longer an option. As the human fleet regrouped, preparing for their next target, communications from across the galaxy poured in. Other species, many of whom had suffered from Krell aggression in the past, but lacked the military strength to respond effectively, offered support, intelligence, and in some cases, military assets to join the human campaign. On the Retribution, Admiral Thorne received a secure transmission from Earth. The Security Council, having seen the results of the first engagement, had made their decision. This would not be a limited punitive action, but a campaign to fundamentally reshape the Krell Imperium's place in the galactic order. "You have full authorization, Admiral," Counselor Hammond informed him, her expression solemn. "The Krell must learn that there are consequences to their actions, not just for the Mercy's light, but for all the aggression they have shown throughout the galaxy. Humanity will no longer stand aside while the strong prey upon the weak." Thorne acknowledged the transmission with a formal salute, understanding the weight of responsibility now placed upon his shoulders. This was not just about vengeance for a single ship. It was about establishing a new paradigm in interstellar relations, one where even the most powerful species understood that certain lines could not be crossed without severe consequences. As the fleet prepared for its next jump, Dr. Chen approached the Admiral on the bridge. "The medical corps has completed treating the Krell survivors," she reported. "Many asked why we would save them after what their forces did to our medical ship." "And what did you tell them?" Thorne asked, curious about her perspective, as one who had witnessed the Mercy's light's destruction firsthand. Chen's expression was complex, part grief, part determination. I told them that we treat the wounded because that's who we are. But we fight those who threaten the defenseless because that's who we are too. Humanity contains multitudes, Admiral. We can heal with one hand and strike with the other. Thorn nodded slowly, finding in her words the perfect encapsulation of the message they were sending to the galaxy. Humanity's capacity for compassion was not a weakness to be exploited, but a choice made from a position of strength, a strength the Krell were now experiencing firsthand. Prepare for our next target, he ordered as the fleet reformed into jump formation. The Krell homeworld needs to understand exactly who they've provoked. The message. The Krell Imperial Palace on Krell Prime was a monument to power, a vast complex of angular structures built from a metallic substance that changed color with the light, creating an ever-shifting display of iridescence visible from orbit. For centuries, it had stood as the unassailable center of Krell authority, its defensive systems believed impenetrable, its location protected by the most powerful fleet in the Imperium. Now it lay exposed to the void of space, its upper levels sheared away by precision strikes from human vessels that had bypassed the vaunted Krell defenses using technologies the Imperium had never even suspected existed. The Imperial fleet, pride of the Krell military, drifted in ruins around the planet, its vessels disabled by targeted electromagnetic pulses rather than destroyed outright, a demonstration of restraint that spoke more eloquently of human power than wholesale destruction would have. Emperor Skarax, supreme commander of the Krell Imperium, stood in the remains of his throne room, his scales dulled with dust and smoke, his normally imposing figure diminished by the devastation around him. Before him, displayed on a still-functioning holographic projector, was the face of Admiral James Thorn. Your defenses are down. Your fleet is neutralized. Your communications network is under our control, Thorn stated, his voice level, devoid of the gloating that would have characterized a Krell victor. You have one opportunity to prevent the complete dismantling of your empire. Skarax's inner eyelids flicked across his yellow eyes, a sign of stress no Krell would willingly show to an enemy. The Krell Imperium does not surrender, he hissed, though the traditional force was missing from his voice. We are not asking for surrender, Thorn replied calmly. We are offering terms for a new relationship between our species and a new role for the Krell within the galactic community. The Emperor's jaw ridges flared in surprise. He had expected demands for territory, for resources, for the traditional spoils of war. The humans' approach was disconcerting. In 1 hour, Thorn continued, representatives from the Galactic Accord will arrive to witness the signing of the Treaty of Krell Prime. Its terms are non-negotiable, but I believe fair. The choice before you is simple, Emperor Skarax. Sign the treaty and lead your people into a new era, or refuse and watch as we systematically dismantle everything the Krell have built over centuries. The transmission ended, leaving Skarax staring at the empty air where Thorn's image had been. Around him, his advisors and military commanders exchanged nervous glances, the unthinkable now before them. The Krell Imperium, forced to accept terms dictated by another power. How? Skarax finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. How did they defeat our defenses so easily? How did they penetrate our communications encryption? We were told humans were technologically inferior, militarily hesitant. Grand Strategist Vex, his scales bearing the scars of many campaigns, stepped forward. We believed what we wished to believe, Emperor. We saw their medical ships, their diplomatic missions, their scientific expeditions, and concluded they were soft. We did not consider that a species might choose peace despite possessing the capacity for devastating war. An hour later, in what remained of the Imperial Palace's grand reception hall, Emperor Skarax found himself facing not just Admiral Thorn, but representatives from 17 species, all members of the Galactic Accord. Some, like the Valexians, had been victims of Krell aggression in the past. Others had stayed neutral, fearing Krell power. All watched now as the treaty was presented. Ambassador Liu, representing Earth, read the terms. The Krell Imperium would surrender all territory taken by force from other species within the past 50 standard years. They would reduce their military to defensive capabilities only. They would submit to Galactic Accord oversight of their government for a period of 20 years. They would pay reparations to the families of those lost on the Mercy's Light and other victims of unprovoked Krell aggression. But there were also unexpected provisions. Earth would provide advanced medical technology to improve Krell healthcare systems. Educational exchanges would be established between Krell and human institutions. Economic assistance would be offered to help the Krell transition from a military-industrial economy to one focused on sustainable development and trade. As the terms were read, Skarax's expression shifted from resignation to confusion, and finally, to cautious curiosity. When Ambassador Liu finished, she looked directly at the Emperor. These terms are designed not to punish the Krell people for the actions of their leadership, but to ensure such actions cannot be repeated while providing a path forward for your civilization. Admiral Thorne stepped forward, his military bearing undiminished even in this diplomatic setting. The attack on the Mercy's Light was a miscalculation based on a fundamental misunderstanding of humanity, he said, his voice carrying throughout the hall. You believed our preference for healing over harming, for words over weapons, indicated weakness. Today, the galaxy learns that humanity's restraint has always been a choice, not a necessity. Skarax studied the human admiral, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. You could have destroyed us completely, he stated, not a question, but a realization. Thorne nodded once. We could have. Instead, we chose to offer a future, one where the Krell find a place in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through contribution. The Emperor's scales shifted color slightly, reflecting his internal conflict. Then, with a decisiveness that surprised many present, he reached for the treaty and pressed his scaled palm to the biometric scanner, officially accepting the terms. As the treaty was formally recorded and transmitted throughout the galaxy, Dr. Miriam Chen watched from the medical ship that had accompanied the human fleet. Around her were Krell civilians being treated for injuries sustained during the brief but decisive campaign, receiving the same care as human personnel, a living demonstration of the principles the Mercy's Light had stood for. A young Krell, barely past adolescence judging by his scale patterns, looked up at her from a medical bed. Why do you help us? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. After what our warriors did. Chen checked his vital signs before responding. Because that's the point your leaders missed, she said gently. Strength isn't just about the ability to destroy. Sometimes the greatest strength is choosing not to use the power you have, choosing to heal instead of harm. She adjusted his medication. But make no mistake, the choice must be respected. Your leaders thought our mercy was weakness. Now they understand it was always strength. In the weeks that followed, news of the Treaty of Krell Prime spread throughout the galaxy, fundamentally altering how other species viewed humanity. What had been seen as a quirk of human psychology, their preference for diplomatic solutions, their establishment of hospitals and research centers rather than military bases, was now recognized as the choice of a species confident in its capabilities, secure enough to extend a helping hand first and a closed fist only when necessary. On Earth, memorial services were held for the crew and patients of the Mercy's Light. Captain Alina Ortega was posthumously awarded the highest civilian honor, her final message. Remember the Mercy's Light, adopted as a reminder of the values humanity stood for and the lines they would not allow to be crossed. Admiral Thorne, upon returning to Earth, submitted his resignation, feeling his work complete. The Security Council refused to accept it, instead appointing him as Earth's military representative to the Galactic Accord, a position from which he could ensure the treaty's provisions were fully implemented and the new understanding of humanity's role in the galaxy properly maintained. Dr. Chen chose a different path. Using her experience and the technology developed during the conflict, she established a new medical research center on the neutral world of Centauri Prime, dedicated to advancing cross-species medical care. Among her first students were several young Krell, sent as part of the educational exchange program, the first step in transforming a relationship built on misunderstanding into one based on mutual respect and cooperation. In the wreckage of the Krell Imperial fleet, salvage crews discovered data records confirming what many had suspected. The attack on the Mercy's Light had been ordered directly by Emperor Skarax, a calculated move to test human resolve, to see if the peacekeepers of the galaxy would act when provoked in the most egregious manner. He had received his answer, one that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Humanity extended an open hand to the galaxy, offering healing, knowledge, and cooperation. But behind that open hand was a closed fist, ready to strike with devastating force when the defenseless were threatened, when lines of decency and honor were crossed. As Dr. Chen told her Krell students on the first day of their medical training, "We choose to heal because we can, because it defines who we are as a species. Remember the Mercy's Light, not just as a tragedy, but as a promise that in this vast, often frightening universe, some principles remain inviolate. Some lines, once crossed, will always be answered." And throughout the galaxy, species both powerful and vulnerable took note. Humanity had finally revealed its true nature, complex and contradictory, capable of boundless compassion and righteous fury in equal measure. They were not merely the peacekeepers of the stars, but its guardians, and the galaxy was safer for it.